At 5:11 a.m. on January 17, 1944, 3 people lay flat on the tiled roof of a row house in Lille, France, choking on chimney smoke and listening to the growl of an SS truck in the street below. 6 meters away, in the same gray Mark, a man in a black wool cap whispered, "Ne bougez pas, don't move," and felt for the next chimney with his gloved hand. Beneath his fingers, hot bricks. Above him, a drifting wall of smoke that stretched from roof to roof in a crooked line down the block. His chimney smoke ladder, foo, had already stopped twice that night. A neighbor 2 doors down had been dragged into the street. A boy had been slapped. A radio set had been found on the other side of town. Every antenna in Lille felt like a noose. Those 3 people on the roof weren't locals. One was a London-trained radio operator. One was his code clerk. One was a courier with the names of every resistance safehouse in the arrondissement sewn into her coat. If they were caught, everyone they knew would burn. 2 weeks earlier, every senior man in their circuit had laughed out loud when the chimney sweep suggested hiding a radio team on a ladder made of smoke. Now his idea was the only thing between them and the headlights crawling up the street. Henri Leclerc had been on roofs since he was 10 years old. He grew up in Lille, son of a chimney sweep in a city that never stopped burning coal. Before the war, the sky above the textile mills and row houses was always streaked gray. In winter, the air tasted like soot. At 12, Henry knew every pitch of tile in his quartier. He knew which roofs creaked, which chimneys leaked, which flues connected 3 houses, and which ones stood alone. He could tell you which buildings shared an attic wall and which were separated by brick. His father taught him the business, cleaning soot, unblocking bird nests, patching cracked mortar. But what Henry really learned was how invisible you could be on a roof if you moved like you belonged there. People looked at streets. They looked at windows. They rarely looked up. When the Germans arrived in May 1940, rolling down Lille's boulevards behind polished motorcycles and panzer columns, Henry was 16. The mills slowed. The chimneys smoked less. The patrols increased. By late 1941, he was running messages for a small resistance group centered around a schoolmaster and a railway clerk. His first job was simple: move notes across town using the only path the Felgendarmerie weren't watching, the rooftops. By 1943, the war in the shadows had a new and deadly heartbeat. Radio. London needed reports on troop movements, on factory output, on V-1 launch sites and rail schedules. So an RF agents parachuted into fields at night with suitcases full of valves and wire. They set up sets in attics and back rooms. The German answer was efficient. Funkebauer, the radio defense service, rolled out direction-finding vans that could triangulate a transmitter in minutes. Gestapo squads and SS field units followed. In 1943, the average life expectancy of a clandestine radio operator in France after their first transmission was measured in weeks. Some lasted 6. Many lasted less. When London sent Armand, real name Thomas Green, a quiet man from Birmingham with a sharp mind for code groups, to Lille in November 1943, his local contact told him the same thing. "He change houses every 2 days, the schoolmaster said. I never transmit from the same room twice. And if you hear boots on the stairs, you burn the papers and jump." Armand listened. He also listened to Henry. By then, Henry wasn't just a runner. He was the man you asked if you wanted to move unseen between Safehouse A and Safehouse B without touching a street. "The Gestapo looks at doors," he liked to say. "We use the chimneys." In December 1943, after a particularly close call, an SS truck arriving on the corner, just as Armand shut down his set in a tailor's back room, Henry started thinking about the problem differently. The radios weren't just hunted. Radios weren't just hunted. They were heavy. A suitcase set with its batteries could weigh 20 kilos. You didn't hop garden walls with that on your back. You didn't scamper over slick tiles in the rain without risk of breaking your neck. One bad slip, one silhouette against a winter moon, and some Feldwebel on the street below would look up, shout. And that would be it. He watched smoke one evening, perched on a mill roof while his father worked below. Every roof in line was coughing out gray plumes at different speeds. Some tall, some short, separated by gaps of nothing. If they all burned the same, the thought came half-formed. What if the space between chimneys wasn't empty? What if you could stitch those plumes together? A week later, in a cramped cellar behind a bicycle repair shop, he laid it out to the group. They needed to move Armand and his team 2 blocks, from a compromised attic over a grocer's to a safer house behind a church. The street between was watched at night. Gendarmerie with white gorgets stopped anyone in curfew hours. The back alleys had been closed off with barbed wire and sawhorses after a shooting. "You can still go over," Henri said, jabbing at his rough sketch of the block. He'd drawn little rectangles for roofs, little squares for chimneys. Here, they all have working stoves. If we ask Madame Roux, old Leon, and the Martin family to light their fires at the same time, and if they burn damp coal or green wood, the smoke will be thick. It will drift across the gap if the wind is right. Dragged his pencil across the paper, turning the separate plumes into a single crooked column. "You move the radio team on the lee side. Whoever of the street, all they see is chimney smoke." The schoolmaster stared at the drawing. So did Armand. Then the railway clerk laughed. It was a strained sound, half nerves, half contempt. "So your grand plan, Henri, is to hide British spies behind bad weather?" A few others chuckled, tension spilling out. "SS patrols already complain the air is filthy," someone said. "You want to give them more smoke to cough on? They'll love us. More fires means more questions," the schoolmaster added. "The commandant rations coal. People are afraid to waste it. You start telling half the street to build big smoky fires at 4 a.m, and someone will talk." Armand ran a thumb over the edge of the table. "How thick would it have to be?" he asked quietly. "This ladder of yours." "As thick as a factory day in January," Henri said. "You don't walk on the roofline. You crawl where the smoke hides you. You move in the intervals when they're not looking up." The schoolmaster shook his head. "We are not magicians, Henri. We are not going to choreograph the chimneys of Lille for your chimney smoke ladder. We stick to couriers and alleys. If London wants miracles, they can send more guns." The phrase stuck. For weeks afterwards, whenever Henri mentioned a route, someone would mutter, perhaps we'll climb your smoke ladder and smirk ladder, and smirk. Then the Germans found one of their radio rooms. On January 10, 1944, a Funke-Boyer van parked on Rue de Thionville. Its antenna turned slowly, sniffing the air. Inside, headphones crackled. A young operator frowned, adjusted his dials. He pointed. Gestapo and SS troops stormed a flat above a bakery. Armand wasn't there. His code clerk, Jean, was. So were 2 young runners and a notebook with 3 half-burned pages. John lasted 36 hours under interrogation. By the time he died, 10 addresses were compromised. The church safehouse, the grocer's attic, the bicycle repair shop. They didn't know when the raids would come. They only knew they would. On January 16th, a warning came through from a sympathetic gendarme. SS units were being assembled for a sweep of the quarter before dawn. If they find a radio at any of our addresses, the schoolmaster said, they roll up everything. "We must move Armand now." "The streets are watched," the railway clerk said. "A back lanes are fenced," someone else added. "We are rats in a cage." Silence fell. Then Armand turned to Henri. "Can you still build your ladder?" he asked. The room went stiller. The schoolmaster opened his mouth to object, saw the look in Armand's eyes, and closed it again. This was London's man, their signal's lifeline. Yes, Henri said. His mouth was dry. "If the families agree. If the wind holds." "How many do you need?" Armand asked. 3 chimneys we can control. The rest will do what they always do." Do it," Armand said. "Henri," the schoolmaster began. "Do it," Armand repeated. "If they catch us on the street, we all die. If they catch us in the attics, we all die. I will take my chances in the smoke." Convincing the neighbors took half of the short night they had left. Old Madame Roux at number 14 was easy. She hated the Germans with a passion that burned as hot as her stove. She agreed to burn wet coal. Old rags, anything Henri handed her, so long as it made smoke and annoyed any Felgendarm in range. Leon Martin was harder. Coal was rationed. He had children. "We are not asking you to waste it," Henri said, standing in his kitchen at 2 in the morning. "We are asking you to burn it badly. I will pay you back in fuel. I swear it on my father's grave." Leon stared at the 3 faces in his kitchen, Henri, the schoolmaster, and a stranger with tired eyes who spoke French with a foreign cadence. He finally nodded. "My sons," he said, "by 4:30 a.m. Henri had his line. Chimney 1, Rue, Chimney 2, a cafe whose owner would light his bread oven early by accident. Chimney 3, the Martins. Beyond that, 3 more houses that would burn whatever they had because it was a cold morning, and that's what they did every day. The wind was the last thing. From the mill roof, Henri held out his hand. It came from the west. not too strong, enough to lay the smoke sideways across the tiles along the line he'd drawn in his head. At 4:50 a.m., he went back down to the attic above the grocer's, where Armand and his team had already packed their set. The radio weighed like a dead child. Too heavy, too precious. 10 minutes, Henri said. We leave when Madame Rue fills the sky at 4:58 a.m. The first plume rose from Rue's chimney, dark and thick, carrying the sharp stink of burning rags. At 5:01, the cafe oven joined it, a pillar of pale gray. At 5:05, the Martin's fire took, belching brown clouds laced with the smell of damp wood and potato peelings. From the street, it looked like any other winter morning in an industrial town. From the roofs, it looked like a shifting wall. Henri went first. He slung the radio over his back. The code clerk followed, then the courier. Armand came last with a pistol and a small bundle of papers, the ones that would ruin them all if they were taken. They slipped out onto the roof through a trapdoor and dropped to their bellies. From that height, the street felt very far away and very close. The first meters were the worst. The smoke hadn't pooled yet. Their bodies were black shapes against a laid sky. Henri could feel every tile under his chest. Then the wind nudged Rue's plume sideways. They disappeared. He crawled in the lee of the first chimney, pressed so close his sleeve brushed hot brick. The smoke wrapped them, rough and warm, making eyes sting and throats itch. It also broke up their outlines, turned limbs into shadows and shadows into nothing. He reached across the tiny gap between roofs, barely 60 centimeters, and felt for the lip of the next house. A second later, the code clerk's fingers gripped his ankle. Below, an SS truck rolled into the street, its engine note rising as it slowed. Henri froze. One more meter and his boot would be visible past the edge of the chimney. One backward shuffle, and Armand's hand might knock a loose tile into the gutter, sending it skittering to the cobbles. They lay there, pressed between warm brick and shifting fog, while a man in a black coat stepped out of the truck, coughed, and waved a gloved hand in front of his face. "A chaise, these French and their chimneys," he muttered. He looked up, squinting against the smoke. From the street he saw only a dirty plume, the faint line of tile, the harsh angle of brick, no faces, no boots, no radio suitcase. After a moment, he spat on the sidewalk, shouted to his driver, and the truck rolled on. The four figures on the roof exhaled together. The second gap was easier. The third was not. By then, Henri's eyes were watering so much that the world was a smear. He misjudged the distance between two chimneys and nearly rolled into a bare patch of roof. Only Armand's grip on his belt stopped him. "Slow," Armand whispered. English, but the meaning needed no translation. It took them 16 minutes to travel less than 50 meters. At 5:27 a.m., they slipped through a loose tile into the attic above the church safehouse, a dim space that smelled of dust, wax, and old hymnals. The woman waiting there crossed herself when she saw them. Behind them, the smoke ladder frayed and thinned as fires burned hotter and cleaner. By full light, it was just another morning pall over a city learning to breathe under occupation. Within an hour, the SS were banging on doors across the neighborhood, shouting, dragging men into the street, demanding identity cards. They searched attics. They kicked in shutters. They did not find a radio set on Rue de Thionville. 6 months later, when the British historian who would become the so official chronicler interviewed Armand in London, he leafed through the operations reports and paused at January 1944. A Lille circuit avoided major arrest sweep. He read aloud, "Purchanewer, I'll be moving entire radio team across rooftops under cover of chimney smoke." Armand smiled faintly. "A chimney smoke ladder," he corrected. "You should give the lad his name for it." The historian raised an eyebrow. "The lad?" He went back to his brushes, Armand said. "He'll probably clean some of your flues after the war. Don't print his name." In the official history, the episode became a single sentence in an appendix about a local improvisations. Unofficially, it spread the way such things always do. Across northern France and Belgium in the last year of the occupation, radio teams in a handful of towns began timing their moves to the kitchen fires of housewives and bakers. Some used only one chimney. Some used 3. One madman in Rouen used the black smoke from a sabotaged coal depot to cover an entire quarter's worth of activity for an afternoon. No formal manual ever listed a chimney smoke ladder as an approved concealment tactic. But years later, when the French army rewrote its urban warfare doctrine in the 1950s, a single line in a classified annex read, Doctrinal note: in dense cityscapes, pay attention to vertical signatures. Smoke, steam, dust as viable cover along roof routes. Henri Leclerc survived the war. In September 1944, when British tanks finally rolled through Lille and people pulled hidden tricolors from under beds, he went back to his father's tools. There were chimneys everywhere, plenty of work. He married a girl who'd sold bread under German ration cards and pretended not to see things she saw. He never told her about the night he crawled through smoke with 3 lives tied to his belt. In 1961, a young historian from Paris came to Lille collecting stories about the resistance. Someone gave him a name and an address. Henri agreed to talk about code words, dead drops, the time he pretended to be drunk to distract a German patrol from a hidden cache. When the historian asked, "And is it true you once made a ladder out of smoke?" Henri laughed for the first time in the interview. "Well, they still remember that?" he said. He described the fires, the neighbors, the taste of soot in his teeth. He asked again that his name not be used. In the footnote that eventually appeared in a little Reed journal, the historian wrote, "In one Lille circuit, a chimney smoke ladder was used at least once to move a wireless team under the noses of S patrols." The method depended on intimate local knowledge of roof lines and the cooperation of civilians willing to burn scarce fuel. No more. That was enough. The war moved on. New ones came. Radios shrank. Satellites rose. The air over cities filled with different kinds of signals. But somewhere, on some winter morning long after, a chimney sweep in Lille watched 3 plumes of smoke rise in just the right pattern and thought, for a second, of the way 4 bodies had once moved in that shifting gray, invisible to the men with trucks and guns below. And he smiled, just a little, at the memory of the trick everyone had mocked, until the night it worked.